Meanwhile, there is growing outrage today after the Trump administration reversed Obama-era protections for transgender students in public schools. The directive put in place last year allowed transgender students to use restrooms that match their gender identity.
But the Trump administration argues the issue should be left up to the states. We want to bring in CBS News legal analyst Rikki Klieman to talk a little bit about this. So let's talk about what the Attorney General says, that basically this is a legal issue. Can you explain that? Or it isn't a legal issue, rather?
Well, he's saying it's a policy issue. However, is it really policy or really is it a legal issue? Because if what is coming out of Washington is to say that Title IX of the Civil Rights Act, which is the legislation that has been used in order to effect things involving issues of sex or gender, if what the Attorney General is saying, or if the subtext is, that although you cannot have sex discrimination, but you might have gender discrimination, that Title IX does not protect against that. That's a legal issue. That's not a policy issue.
So, well, removing these guidelines, I think the question Americans have, removing these guidelines, will that invite discrimination in schools?
It's possible. One of the things you know is that there is a whole movement afoot on many policies to say it shouldn't be federal, it should be left to the states. And I think we're going to see this more and more, particularly in issues of social policy. So if we look at it as being moved to the states or removed to the states, we have to look and see what the state will do. The Commonwealth of Massachusetts, for example, says, okay, we have our own policy, and that you may choose, since this has been called the bathroom debate, but it is far broader than that, you may be able to choose the bathroom of the gender to which you identify rather than that which is on your birth certificate. So will it change something in Massachusetts? No. But might it change something in a state next door? Perhaps. Now, you could also, it can get worse. Depending on what state you're in. Let's say there does not become a statewide policy because often education is left to the individual boards of education. So do we have this issue that is one way in one county and a different way in another county? One of the things that Betsy DeVos said yesterday, which I really do give her great credit for, is that in essence, I'm paraphrasing, we are not going to tolerate discrimination and bullying of our students in schools. And transgender students, especially at a young age, are ripe for bullying. And the question then will become, how do they or their parents get recourse? Where is their remedy? And we're not just simply talking about a bathroom sign. We are talking about far greater issues of discrimination.
So when you say where is their remedy, could you see this going to the Supreme Court? Could you see a case?
Well, I think that we do have cases that are migrating their way to the United States Supreme Court. And one of the cases that we know of is, of course, this was all put on hold because there was a case in Texas where it was said that the Obama regulation that would have opened up public schools to having bathrooms decided that you could decide by virtue of your choice and the gender that you believed you were rather than by your birth, that these cases are going to go up and percolate to the United States Supreme Court, particularly if we look at this as a legal issue rather than a policy issue. Are we talking about simple states' rights and, okay, we'll leave it in the states and everybody will figure out their own way? Or are we talking about something far greater, that is that you can be allowed to discriminate on the basis of gender choice?
So ultimately, I mean, when you read the statement from Attorney General Sessions, and he says that they want to review what the Obama administration said was part of the Department of Justice's plan to allow these schools to, in other words, the Justice Department was saying, you can enforce it this way, this is how we stand on it. He's saying that they want to review that. What's there to review?
Well, there isn't much to review because it's just a policy.
Right.
So you're either for it or against it. Now, it could be said that you'd like to take a look at how it is working in places where it is being used and compare that to places where it is not being used. So I suppose that what you could make, as often happens, you could make a review of all kinds of things around the country.
Right.
But ultimately, I think this is going to be a policy that becomes a legal issue, if it isn't already, in the whole idea of going back to the states. And this is just the beginning. And I'm not saying only in the arena of transgender rights. I think that we're going to have a lot of social issues that we have thought of as having been national that are going to revert back to the states. And it's going to happen not only because of the administration in Washington, it's going to happen because of the courts.
Right. Yeah. And that was sort of, I think, what I was trying to get at, which is that what the Obama administration said was that the Department of Justice feels this way, and this is how they want the states and the schools to apply the law. What the Attorney General now is saying, look, it's not going to be left to the Department of Justice. The states, the schools, should be able to decide what to do.
And you have to remember that there is a great throng for people saying that we really believe in states' rights. And education is one of those amorphous things. Should it really be guided by the United States of America through the administration, or should it be guided on a local level? And I'm not even saying states' rights. I'm saying locally, municipality to county, what have you. And I think that there's going to be a lot of battlegrounds. And as I say, it's not only going to be in this issue.
Yeah, and certainly you see with this administration, there is a tendency to sort of bounce things back to the states when they're awkward and uncomfortable and difficult issues.
Well, also, you have to remember that this administration firmly believes that we have too much overregulation coming from the federal government into people's personal lives. And if the feeling is, and then the policy becomes, that the U.S. government ought to keep its hands off of very personal issues, then they are going to go back to the states. However, there is something we call the United States Constitution, and if it is a constitutional issue, it rises above that, and indeed, of course, it becomes a federal issue for the courts.
Right. Rikki Klieman, thank you so much.
Thanks, Rikki.